wasn't expecting anything strange to happen when I walked into Dollar Tree. It was just another late afternoon, the kind of mundane, quiet day that doesn't deserve a second thought. I'd been there 100 times before. It's one of those stores that's part of the daily grind, the kind of place you go when you need a few things: paper towels, cleaning supplies, or maybe just some candy. Cheap, cheerful, and always reliable. But on this day, something felt off. The store was busy, but not overwhelmingly so. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, buzzing faintly. The floors were scuffed and streaked with dirt, and the shelves were neatly stocked with colorful packaging that didn't quite match the dullness of the atmosphere. I picked up a basket, feeling its flimsy plastic handle dig into my palm, and began to wander down the aisles. The usual. At first, I didn't notice anything wrong. I grabbed some snacks, a bottle of shampoo, and even a cute little set of candles in glass jars that I didn't really need. I stopped by the toy section just to browse. After all, it's Dollar Tree. What harm could it do? That's when I saw it. A doll. At first, I thought it was just another one of those cheaply made toys that are scattered around the shelves. But then I looked closer. It was one of those porcelain dolls, the kind with glassy eyes that always seem a little too lifelike. It had messy, tangled hair and a faded dress that looked like it belonged to a different era. Something about it didn't sit right, like it was out of place. I picked it up, running my thumb over the cool surface of the doll's face. The eyes, though, that's what really got to me. They were watching me. They weren't just painted. Unlike most dolls, they were too real, too expressive. I glanced around, suddenly feeling a chill. I laughed to myself, trying to shake off the feeling. It's just a doll, I told myself. No big deal. But when I looked back at the shelf, the spot where the doll had been seemed wrong. I could have sworn it was further down the shelf when I first saw it. Had it moved? My heartbeat quickened, a strange unease creeping into my chest. Everything okay? The voice came from behind me, making me jump. A cashier, mid-20s, with a bored expression and a name tag that read, Jill. Yeah, fine, I said, forcing a smile and putting the doll back on the shelf. Just looking at this. She glanced at the doll, then back at me, her face unreadable. That one's been here for a while, she said almost too casually. No one's ever bought it. I nodded, the chill crawling up my spine. Something about her tone didn't feel right, but I didn't push it. I walked away, hoping the uncomfortable feeling would fade. But it didn't. The rest of my shopping went uneventfully, and I checked out, trying to push the strange encounter out of my mind. The cashier didn't say anything more, and I didn't linger. As I drove home, I couldn't shake the image of the doll from my mind. I even looked over my shoulder once or twice, just to make sure no one was following me. It was silly, I told myself. But then when I walked through the door of my apartment, I saw it. The doll was sitting on my kitchen counter. I froze, my stomach dropping. There was no way it could have gotten there. I hadn't brought it with me, had I? I could barely remember walking out of the store. Just the dull buzz of the checkout register, the clink of my change in my pocket. But the doll was there, staring at me with those glassy, lifelike eyes. My hands were shaking as I reached for it, picking it up and turning it in my hands. No tag, no price sticker, just the cold porcelain and those eyes. Watching, always watching. I felt a sudden compulsion to speak. Where did you come from? The words sounded ridiculous, but they slipped out of my mouth anyway. I set the doll down on the counter, heart hammering. There was no logical explanation. I checked my shopping bag. The doll wasn't there. I checked my pockets. Nothing. I walked back to the car, hoping maybe I'd somehow grabbed it on accident, but no. It wasn't in the back seat. It wasn't anywhere. I returned to my apartment, feeling the weight of the silence press down on me. My phone buzzed. Just a text from a friend. Nothing important. I glanced at the doll again. The way it was positioned, it seemed like it had turned slightly. Or was it my imagination? But that's when I heard it. A soft scraping sound, like nails dragging across the surface of the counter. I froze, blood running cold. I turned slowly, expecting to see the doll sitting there as it had been, but it wasn't. The doll was gone. My stomach twisted. Panic bubbled up in my throat, and I backed away from the counter. It was in the hallway now. I could see it, just at the corner of my vision. The doll was standing in the doorway, its head tilted, those glassy eyes fixed on me. I ran. I don't remember much of what happened next. Just frantic movement, the rush of blood in my ears. I left the apartment, my heart racing, my hands trembling. I went back to my car, didn't stop driving until I found myself miles from home. I haven't been back to that Dollar Tree since. I'm not sure I ever will be. The doll, if it's even real, is still out there somewhere, watching, waiting, and I can't shake the feeling that one day it'll be back. I've been to Dollar Tree hundreds of times, but I'll never forget that one trip. It started like any other. The store was full of the usual customers, browsing through aisles lined with bargain bins and colorful packaging. I'd just finished a long shift at work and needed to pick up a few things, mostly household items. It was early evening, just before the rush hour, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a cold, artificial glow on everything. The store wasn't anything special. It looked exactly like any other Dollar Tree I'd been to. Dull, cramped, and a little bit chaotic. Shelves were crammed with cheap toys, cleaning supplies, canned goods, and snacks. The faint smell of plastic mixed with the lingering scent of floor cleaner. Nothing unusual. I grabbed a basket and started down the aisles, moving past shelves of discount kitchenware. As I moved further into the store, something caught my eye. It was a shelf tucked in the far corner, one that I rarely paid attention to. The one with small trinkets, odd little decorations, and knickknacks. That's when I first heard it. A whisper. I stopped in my tracks, looking around. The store was quiet. The usual hum of the refrigerator section the only background noise. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but it came again. A soft, almost imperceptible voice, just loud enough to make me pause. It didn't sound like a voice from any of the customers nearby. It was too close. I glanced around, but there was no one standing near me. "Hello?" I called out, half expecting someone to answer. But the only sound was the rustling of plastic bags and the occasional shuffle of feet from a distant aisle. I shook it off, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe it was the store's strange acoustics, or the wind outside, carrying voices from nearby. I continued walking, but the whispers didn't stop. They followed me, drifting through the aisles like a soft breeze. Each time I reached a new section, they grew louder, more distinct. I couldn't make out the words, but there was a sense of urgency to them, like they were trying to tell me something, or warn me. I found myself near the back of the store, where the seasonal section was. A large stack of plastic pumpkins and Halloween decorations loomed ahead. That's when the whispers became sharper, more desperate. "Turn around," the voice seemed to say, or was it, "It's behind you"? I couldn't be sure. It was so faint, I thought it could be my imagination. But the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I spun around, scanning the aisles, but there was no one there. I didn't see anyone standing in the aisles or even lurking around the corners. My breath came quicker now, the whispers relentless, echoing around me. My pulse thudded in my ears. "Turn around," it whispered again, clearer this time. The voice was soft, almost like a child's, but there was an edge to it, something wrong. I quickly moved to the front of the store, telling myself to get a grip. I had to leave, I told myself. I wasn't about to stay here any longer than I had to. But just as I turned the corner, I froze. There, in the middle of the aisle, stood an old man. He was tall and gaunt, his face wrinkled and pale, almost sickly looking. He wore a faded jacket, and his eyes were wide, staring at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. But what made my stomach drop wasn't his appearance. It was the way he was standing, completely still, as though he had been there for hours or longer. "Can I help you?" I managed to ask, my voice shaking slightly. He didn't respond. He just stood there staring at me with those wide, unblinking eyes. His lips barely moved, but I could hear the whispers again, this time coming from his direction. It was almost like the words were leaking out of him, floating in the air between us. "You can't leave. You can't." The words weren't coherent, but they made the blood drain from my face. I didn't know if he was speaking them or if the whispers were coming from somewhere else entirely. All I knew was I needed to get out of there, fast. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding. My thoughts were racing, and the whispers seemed to grow louder, more insistent. I glanced over my shoulder. He was still there, watching me. I broke into a run. I hurried to the checkout, my mind a whirlwind of panic. The cashier, a young woman with a bored expression, barely looked up as I slammed my items on the counter. I kept glancing around, half expecting to see the old man following me, But when I dared to look back, the store seemed normal again. Too normal. I paid quickly and rushed out of the store, the cold night air a relief against the heat that had built up in my chest. But even as I stepped outside, the whispers lingered in my mind. They weren't gone. They were still there, like a buzzing in my ears. It's been weeks since that night, but I can't shake the feeling that something followed me home. The whispers haven't stopped. They come in my dreams, in the silence of the night, creeping just at the edge of my awareness. Every time I close my eyes, I hear them, soft, insistent, like they're waiting for me. And sometimes, just sometimes, I think I hear them at the back of the store, echoing through the aisles. I haven't been back to Dollar Tree since, but I know I'll have to go again one day. Everyone needs something from that store. The question is, will it ever let me leave? It's hard to describe the exact moment I knew something was wrong. I suppose it's because everything started off so normal. A regular Wednesday evening, the kind where you don't think twice about a trip to Dollar Tree. I've been to this store 1,000 times, picked up cleaning supplies, snacks, cheap plastic containers. It's a regular part of life, right? I don't know why I was feeling so uneasy as I pushed my cart down the aisles that night, but something about the place didn't sit right. Maybe it was the way the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering, in and out, casting long, distorted shadows. Or maybe it was the eerie quiet that hung in the air, like the usual hustle of busy shoppers was just gone. It wasn't a particularly busy night. The few people who were there seemed to keep to themselves, moving in silence like they were all trapped in their own little world. I grabbed a pack of paper towels and some dish soap, and I made my way to the back of the store where the seasonal section was. That's when I noticed it. At the very back of the aisle, there was a shelf that I'd never seen before. It wasn't labeled with anything fancy, just a few cardboard boxes stacked on top of each other. But it seemed odd. The boxes were old-looking, faded as though they had been sitting there for years, untouched. I stared at them for a moment, thinking it was nothing more than a forgotten pile of stock. But when I turned my gaze upward, my heart skipped a beat. There, in the far corner, was a figure, a person. They were standing so still, their back to me, facing the shelves as though they were browsing, but the way they stood was unnerving, unnatural, almost like they were frozen in time. The figure was tall, wearing a long, dark coat. I couldn't see their face, but something about them sent a wave of cold panic through me. I wasn't sure why I felt so unsettled, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't supposed to see them. I looked away quickly, my heart pounding in my chest. I tried to push the thought out of my mind, but I couldn't. I moved to the next aisle, but I couldn't stop glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see the figure following me. But there was nothing. The aisle was empty. I shook my head, trying to focus. I grabbed a few more items, tissues, toothpaste, things I didn't really need. But as I pushed my cart toward the front of the store, I noticed something strange. The shelves near the checkout were completely empty. No more snacks, no rows of greeting cards. Just blank spaces where things should have been. A chill ran down my spine. I stopped, looking around. It wasn't right. There was no one else around anymore. Not a single soul in sight. I heard the sound of footsteps, soft but deliberate, echoing behind me. I spun around quickly, but the store was still empty. Just the faint hum of the overhead lights and the strange feeling that something was watching me. I picked up the pace, trying to get to the register, but then I saw it again. The figure, this time standing in the aisle, blocking the path to the front door. They were facing me now, but their face was hidden in shadow. I couldn't make out any details, but I could feel their presence, thick and heavy in the air. "Excuse me?" I called out, my voice shaky. No response. I took a step forward, my feet moving almost on their own, my mind racing. I couldn't breathe. The figure didn't move. I didn't know what to do. I was frozen, paralyzed, unable to look away. And then, without warning, the lights flickered. The entire store seemed to pulse with darkness, the shadows shifting and warping. For a split second, the figure was gone. I took a step back, heart pounding, adrenaline surging through my veins. But as I turned to flee, I heard it. Whispers. Faint, but growing louder. They were coming from the aisles, from the walls, from everywhere. A soft murmur at first, but it quickly grew to an almost deafening chorus of voices. "Don't leave. Don't leave. The words echoed in my ears, the sound so loud it hurt. The whispers were everywhere all around me, and the more I tried to block them out, the closer they seemed to get. It was as if the walls themselves were speaking to me, telling me that I couldn't escape, that I wasn't supposed to leave. I turned again, my heart racing, looking for a way out. But the store had changed. The aisles weren't the same anymore. The rows of shelves stretched out impossibly long, the paths twisting and winding like some kind of maze. The air felt thick, suffocating, and every corner I turned led me deeper into the store. It was as though the very building itself was pulling me in, trapping me. And then I saw them, the people. They were standing still, just like the figure at the back of the store. Only now they were everywhere. Shoppers, employees, people I didn't recognize, just standing there in the aisles, their heads tilted slightly, their eyes staring blankly ahead. I couldn't tell if they were alive or not, but they weren't moving. Not at all. Panic clawed at me. I ran toward the exit, but the doors wouldn't open. They were locked, sealed shut. I pounded on them, screaming, but the whispers only grew louder, and the people in the aisles just kept staring. Finally, I managed to break free, pushing through the front doors with everything I had left. As I stepped outside, gasping for air, I looked back. The lights flickered once more, and for just a moment I could see the figure again, standing by the door, watching me leave. I haven't gone back since, but sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear the whispers in the dark, calling me back. And when I close my eyes, I can still see those empty, staring faces in the aisles. I don't know what happened to the people who disappeared in that store, or if they're still there. But one thing's for sure, I never want to find out. It was supposed to be just another ordinary trip to Dollar Tree. I'm not one for big shopping sprees, so I always end up in that store when I need the basics. Snacks, cleaning supplies, maybe a random kitchen gadget I don't really need, but somehow convince myself I do. But this time something felt different. Maybe it was because I was tired, or maybe because the place had started feeling a little too familiar, like something was quietly changing about it, something I couldn't put my finger on. I walked into the store around 7 p.m., the evening light fading outside. The fluorescent lights inside hummed overhead, flickering every few seconds. Nothing new there. The aisles were as packed as usual, shelves crowded with colorful packaging and products stacked high in plastic bins. Everything looked perfectly ordinary. But there was an odd sense of stillness in the air, like the usual hustle of people walking around had faded to a dull murmur. It felt quieter than usual, almost too quiet. I grabbed a basket, moving down the first aisle with no real sense of urgency. Just a few things to pick up. I passed the snack aisle, then the cleaning supplies, stopping at the paper towel section. Everything was neatly arranged, just as it always was. I moved to the next aisle, scanning the shelves for whatever caught my eye. That's when I noticed it. A small corner tucked away behind a massive stack of discounted kitchen gadgets. It wasn't a section I'd ever noticed before, nor was it marked with any kind of sign. Just a dark little space barely wide enough for a person to stand in. But there it was, almost hidden in plain sight. I couldn't see what was in that corner, but there was something about it that made me feel uneasy. It felt wrong, like it didn't belong in this store. A shadow seemed to hover around it, even though the rest of the aisles were brightly lit. I shook it off. It was probably just a weird angle with the lighting, I thought. But still, I couldn't stop glancing over at it. I told myself it was nothing, just a shadow. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more I couldn't. I took a few steps closer, curious despite myself. The corner was cramped, surrounded by stacks of plastic bins and low shelves. I leaned slightly to the side to peer into it, but it was hard to make out much in the dimness. Just rows of strange, mismatched items. Empty plastic containers, faded dish towels, and something small and square I couldn't identify. My heart thudded in my chest for no real reason. I quickly pulled myself away. The uneasy feeling wasn't going away. I felt like I needed to leave that corner behind. I turned, pushing my basket down the aisle toward the register, but just as I did, I caught sight of something. Someone standing in the corner. At first, I thought it was just another shopper, but there was something off about how still they were. They were hunched over, their back toward me, and though they were within sight, they didn't seem to be moving at all. The longer I looked, The more I realized I couldn't see their face. It was like they didn't even have one. The shadow in that corner seemed to cling to them, almost like it was part of them. My breath caught in my throat. I turned quickly, my eyes darting around. I felt the skin on the back of my neck prickle, and my stomach twisted. I glanced over my shoulder again, but there was nothing there. No person, no figure, just the empty corner I had been staring at moments before. I started walking faster toward the front of the store, my pulse quickening. The whisper of the lights overhead was the only sound now, and it seemed louder than usual. As I passed the aisles, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed, that something was just behind me, hidden in the spaces between the shelves. My footsteps seemed to echo unnaturally loud, the air growing thicker with every step. The cashier at the front barely looked up as I dumped my items on the counter, her expression blank, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. But I could feel my hands trembling as I fumbled with my wallet. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. As I stepped outside, the cool air hit me like a relief, but the weight of the store stayed with me. It felt like I was being watched, like something from inside that corner had followed me out into the night. I drove home quickly, trying to shake the feeling of dread that seemed to hang around me. When I got back to my apartment, I rushed inside, locking the door behind me. I tried to put the evening out of my mind, but I couldn't. That corner kept replaying in my head. The figure, no, the shape, standing there, motionless. The feeling that it wasn't just my imagination. The next day, I had to go back. I needed to know if I was losing my mind or if something truly was wrong. I walked into the store again around noon, trying to act casual. The aisles were bustling with customers now, and the store felt completely normal. I grabbed a basket and wandered to the back, toward the spot where the corner had been. But when I reached the aisle where I had seen it, the corner was gone. There was no dark space, no weird shadow, nothing that seemed out of place. Just shelves lined with cheap kitchen gadgets. I blinked, confused. Maybe I had imagined it, I thought. Maybe I was just overtired the night before. But as I turned to leave, I felt it. That same heavy, suffocating presence that had followed me the day before. It wasn't gone. I could feel it lingering in the air. And when I glanced back at the empty aisle, I could swear I saw something. A dark shadow creeping across the floor, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. I walked out of Dollar Tree feeling no safer than I had the night before. I can't shake the feeling that something is still there, behind that hidden corner, watching, waiting. And I can't help but wonder if it's been following me all along. I don't think it's over yet. Not by a long shot. I never thought a simple visit to Dollar Tree would turn into anything more than a quick stop for some cleaning supplies and snacks. It was just another afternoon. The kind of trip I'd taken 100 times before. But that day, something felt off. I've been shopping at this Dollar Tree for years, and the routine was always the same. It's a small, cramped store. Narrow aisles crammed with products, cheap plastic containers, cleaning supplies stacked high on dusty shelves. The fluorescent lights above hum in a familiar, almost soothing way, flickering every so often. It's the kind of place you don't expect to think twice about. The aisles were mostly empty that day, save for a few other customers who seemed just as disinterested as I was. I was at the end of the cleaning aisle when I noticed something strange. A row of empty boxes, which was nothing unusual for a store like Dollar Tree. But these weren't just any empty boxes. They were neatly arranged, almost perfectly lined up against the wall. It looked too deliberate. I glanced around, and it seemed like no one else was noticing it. It was a small thing, but it immediately tugged at the back of my mind. Then I noticed the manager, Tim, standing by the register, his usual spot. But something was different about him. He was standing perfectly still, not moving, staring at the counter. Tim had always been friendly, smiling and greeting customers, but that day there was no smile. His eyes were wide and his face was pale, like he hadn't slept in days. I walked past him, giving him a slight nod. He didn't respond. I stopped, hesitant. It was strange. He'd always at least given a tired hey or how's it going. But now, nothing. Hey, Tim, I called, feeling a little awkward. Everything okay? He didn't answer. In fact, he didn't even seem to notice I was there. I waved my hand in front of his face. Still nothing. I backed away slowly, confused, but chalked it up to maybe him just being a little out of it. It was a long shift, after all. I grabbed my things and headed to the checkout, feeling a strange unease crawling under my skin. When I turned to look at Tim again, He was gone. I double-checked the counter. No sign of him. His shift wasn't over yet, and the store wasn't that busy, so it was odd that he would leave so suddenly. The cashier, a younger girl named Ellie, was busy scanning my items, and when I asked her where Tim had gone, she looked up at me, wide-eyed. "Tim? He's not here," she said, her voice shaking just a little. "He's been gone all day." I frowned, but he was just here. He was standing at the counter. "You didn't see him leave?" Ellie's eyes darted nervously around the store. "No, I haven't seen him. Not since this morning, at least." I left the store, a strange knot in my stomach. Something didn't feel right. I tried to push it out of my mind, but every time I thought about it, the unease grew. I went home, but I couldn't shake the thought of Tim, how he'd been acting, how he'd disappeared so suddenly. The next day I went back. I didn't plan to look for anything specific, but the curiosity gnawed at me. When I walked into the store, I immediately noticed that something was off. The shelves looked a little more disorganized than usual, and there was a weird, heavy silence in the air. I didn't see Ellie at the register. Instead, a man I didn't recognize was there, scanning items with a blank expression on his face. "Hey, where's Tim?" I asked, trying to sound casual. The man blinked at me, as though he hadn't heard me at first. Then he looked around and leaned in a little closer. "Tim? He doesn't work here anymore." I stared at him. "What do you mean, he doesn't work here anymore? He was just here yesterday." The man just shrugged. "Tim left. We don't know where he went." It's like he vanished. A cold chill ran through me. I'd been in the store the day before and Tim had been there. I couldn't wrap my head around it. "Wait, what happened?" I asked, my voice starting to shake a little. The man glanced nervously over his shoulder. "I don't know. I don't ask too many questions around here." I walked out of the store feeling sick. How could someone just disappear like that? How could Tim just vanish without anyone noticing? I couldn't stop thinking about it. I went home and searched online, hoping to find something, anything, that could explain what had happened to him. But there was nothing. No news, no reports, just nothing. The next day, I went back again. This time, I had to know. I had to see if anyone else had noticed anything strange. When I walked into the store, it was as if no time had passed at all. Everything looked normal, too normal, but the sense of dread in my stomach kept growing. I approached the aisle where I'd seen Tim the day before, and this time I saw it. A small sign, tucked behind a stack of empty boxes. It wasn't something I'd noticed before. It simply read, "Out of stock, Tim." I felt a lump rise in my throat. I walked toward the back of the store, my heart racing. That dark corner behind the shelves. It was there again, the one where Tim had been standing. But this time, it was darker, like the shadows were stretching, almost swallowing the light around it. I couldn't explain it. Something was watching me, something that didn't belong in the store. My heart pounded in my chest. I turned to leave, but the door wouldn't open. I was trapped. The man at the counter, the shelves, the boxes, all of it felt wrong. I don't know how long I stood there, my breath coming in short gasps, trying to make sense of what was happening. But then I saw something I'll never forget. From the corner of my eye, I saw Tim's face, just his face, appearing between the shelves. His eyes wide, like he was pleading with me. But when I blinked, he was gone. I don't know what happened to Tim. All I know is that something in that store is waiting, something that doesn't belong there, and I haven't been back since. But every night, I can't help but wonder if I'll hear his voice again, if I'll see that dark corner watching me, and if I'll ever truly escape.